you know who did the shooting?
Yeah, the basketball player.
Just the case of State of Georgia versus Javaris Crittenden. He's number 2 on the supplemental preliminary hearings calendar today.
There was no gun from him. You know, it was me pulled a gun on a team. You remember that was the big headline. Gilbert Arenas pulled a gun on a teammate.
An investigation into 5 NBA players examines whether they held high-ranking status within organized crime structures. The analysis distinguishes between 3 categories: confirmed high-ranking affiliations, individual criminal conduct, and unsubstantiated claims. Clear criminological definitions are established before evaluating individual cases. High-ranking status requires one of 2 criteria. First, street gang or drug trafficking organization leadership, which means direct involvement in commanding criminal operations or controlling large volumes of narcotics. Second, TOC executive roles, which involve managing high-value assets, conducting multi-million-dollar transfers, or assuming significant debts for crime figures. The document also defines criminal categories to provide measurable standards rather than subjective judgments. Individual criminality refers to isolated criminal acts without organizational affiliation. Drug trafficking organizations are structured groups focused on narcotics distribution. Transnational organized crime refers to international criminal enterprises involving financial crimes and money laundering. Nikola Pekovic's case represents confirmed transnational organized crime affiliation. He is listed in police records as a member of the Sharic Crime Organization, a Serbian and Montenegrin drug trafficking syndicate. Pekovic co-owns 33% of Luka S. Bet, a gambling enterprise, with Duško Šarić, the brother of crime boss Darko Šarić. He is also a partner in Spencer and Hill Team, which manages the Mediterranean Hotel complex. Most significantly, Pekovic assumed a €1.15 million debt from Duško Šarić in October 2018. The evidence meets the established criteria for high-ranking TOC affiliation because business investments in gambling and hospitality sectors are recognized money laundering vehicles. The significant debt assumption suggests deeper integration into the organization's financial structure rather than a typical business transaction. Pekovic's status as a high-profile international athlete provided legitimate cover for these operations. He remains active as a businessman, and no NBA sanctions related to organized crime have been publicly reported. Javaris Crittenden's case represents confirmed drug trafficking organization participation. In 2009, Crittenden was involved in a gambling-related incident with teammate Gilbert Arenas, and both players were suspended. In 2011, he was charged with murder and pleaded guilty to manslaughter in the death of Julian Jones, a mother of 4. Prosecutors identified Crittenden as an alleged gang member and noted that the shooting was retaliatory violence over a robbery. Most importantly, in 2014, Crittenden was indicted following a DEA-led drug trafficking sting alongside multiple co-defendants. The indictment alleged his participation in an Atlanta-based DTO selling multi-kilo quantities of cocaine and several hundred pounds of marijuana. The prosecution was handled by the Fulton County District Attorney's Gangs and Drugs Unit, which indicates law enforcement classified his role as part of organized criminal activity. The evidence establishes structural criminal involvement and sustained engagement with criminal enterprises rather than isolated incidents. Crittenden was convicted of manslaughter with a reduced 10-year sentence. Miles Bridges' case presents an unsubstantiated claim of high-ranking gang membership. While Bridges pleaded no contest to felony domestic violence charges, no public records, indictments, or police documentation connect him to gang or organized crime activity. His legal issues involve individual violent crime rather than participation in criminal organizations. The categorization as high-ranking organized crime lacks evidentiary support. Bridges received a significant NBA suspension for his domestic violence charges. Jason Williams' case also represents an unsubstantiated claim. Williams was convicted in connection with the accidental shooting death of limousine driver Kostas Christofi in 2002. He was convicted of negligent homicide and evidence tampering. However, no documentation suggests organized crime affiliation. His case involves personal negligence and legal violations stemming from that incident, not participation in criminal organizations. Williams received a manslaughter and aggravated assault conviction. Charles Barkley's case is similarly unsubstantiated. Barkley's legal issues consist of isolated misdemeanors including DUI, battery, and public intoxication. No evidence connects Barkley to any organized crime structure. The claim appears to reflect public confusion between celebrity notoriety and criminal organization membership. Barkley has faced no organized crime-related legal consequences. The document identifies 3 distinct pathways through which organized crime interfaces with the NBA. The first involves domestic gang or DTO ties, where players with pre-existing connections to street gangs or drug trafficking organizations may re-engage with these networks despite professional success. Crittenton exemplifies this pathway. The second involves financial partnership with TOC, where players become strategic business partners with organized crime figures through investments in gambling, hospitality, or other cash-intensive enterprises. Pekovic exemplifies this pathway. These arrangements provide legitimacy to criminal operations while benefiting players financially. The third pathway involves external corruption and facilitation. External criminal groups corrupt league integrity through match fixing, illegal gambling operations, and property crime targeting. Former NBA referee Tim Donaghy pleaded guilty to conspiracy involving wire fraud and illegal sports betting with alleged mob figures, demonstrating the match-fixing risk. Gilbert Arenas was charged with conspiracy to operate illegal gambling operations, and federal indictments identified a co-defendant as a suspected high-level member of an Israeli transnational organized crime group. The FBI has also warned the NBA about South American theft groups that conduct burglaries of athlete homes during games, exploiting publicly known schedules. One documented instance involved a Milwaukee Bucks player whose home was burglarized during a game, resulting in the theft of approximately $1.484 million in valuables, including cash, designer items, and jewelry. The analysis has significant strengths. It establishes a clear definitional framework with specific criteria rather than vague assertions. It creates clear differentiation between confirmed affiliations, individual criminality, and unsubstantiated claims. It recognizes that domestic DTOs and international TOC operations present different institutional risks. Claims are referenced through legal documents, law enforcement reports, and verified journalism. However, the analysis also has limitations. Police records and criminal affiliations may not always be publicly documented, meaning absence of public evidence doesn't necessarily confirm absence of involvement. Geographic complexity affects prosecution patterns. Pekovic's involvement with international TOC appears to have insulated him from prosecution, while Crittenton faced swift domestic prosecution. This difference may reflect enforcement capacity rather than actual severity of involvement. Additionally, while high ranking is defined clearly, real-world determination of someone's role within an organization often remains ambiguous. The analysis also suggests that pre-existing gang ties create gravitational pull toward criminal networks, but doesn't deeply explore why some players maintain these connections while others don't. The key takeaway is that the distinction between individual criminal misconduct and participation in organized criminal enterprises is substantial and measurable. Two players, Pekovic and Crittenton, demonstrate clear documented involvement in structured criminal organizations. Three players, Williams, Bridges, and Barkley, do not have evidence supporting claims of high-ranking organized crime affiliation, despite receiving significant media attention for their legal troubles. This analysis effectively illustrates how celebrity status and criminal notoriety can blur in public perception, creating false equivalencies between individuals who committed serious crimes and those who participated in organized criminal enterprises. For professional sports leagues, this distinction matters because organized crime poses systemic risks to league integrity that differ fundamentally from individual player misconduct. Understanding the different pathways through which organized crime interacts with professional basketball reveals important patterns. Crittenton represents what researchers call the domestic pathway, where a player with existing street connections never fully disengages from those networks despite professional success and wealth. The gravitational pull of familiar criminal structures appears to persist even when individuals achieve legitimate prominence. This raises critical questions about intervention strategies and whether professional status alone provides sufficient protection against the influence of pre-existing criminal ties. The fact that Crittenton progressed from a gambling-related incident to organized narcotics trafficking demonstrates how seemingly isolated incidents can escalate into deeper criminal involvement. Pekovic's pathway, by contrast, represents foreign infiltration of professional sports. Rather than re-engaging with pre-existing connections, he appears to have developed new relationships with organized crime figures after his playing career. This suggests that professional athletes' wealth, international mobility, and business acumen make them attractive partners for transnational criminal organizations seeking to legitimize illicit funds. The sophistication of Pekovic's involvement, with structured business partnerships, significant financial transactions, and asset co-ownership, demonstrates that modern organized crime operates through apparently legitimate commercial channels rather than stereotypical street-level activities. The contrast between outcomes illustrates how geography and enforcement capacity shape consequences. Crittenton faced swift domestic prosecution and incarceration within the United States criminal justice system. Pekovic, operating internationally with investments in the Balkans, appears to have evaded prosecution despite documented police records identifying him as a member of a criminal organization. This disparity raises questions about whether international sophistication and cross-border financial structures make prosecution more difficult, or whether other factors influence enforcement decisions. It also highlights vulnerabilities in international law enforcement cooperation regarding organized financial crime. The broader context of external organized crime targeting NBA players adds another dimension to the threat landscape. South American theft groups studying NBA schedules and burglarizing player homes during games represent a different category of threat, one where athletes are victims rather than participants. These coordinated burglaries suggest organized crime networks see professional athletes as high-value targets precisely because their schedules are public and their homes contain significant assets. This demonstrates that the NBA's vulnerability to organized crime extends beyond player conduct to include targeting by external criminal enterprises. The distinction between these different threat vectors, internal gang ties, financial partnerships with TOC figures, and external targeting, requires fundamentally different compliance and security approaches. The NBA's historical low tolerance for gambling-related disputes reflects recognition that financial vulnerability creates entry points for organized crime influence. Player education programs addressing gang ties differ significantly from financial transparency requirements for international business ventures, which differ again from enhanced security protocols for protecting player assets. A comprehensive risk management strategy must address all three pathways simultaneously, while recognizing that some players may face none of these risks, while others navigate multiple vulnerability points simultaneously. The evolution of organized crime tactics demonstrates adaptation to modern circumstances and opportunities. Traditional stereotypes of street-level gang activity and mob involvement no longer capture the sophistication of contemporary criminal enterprises. Transnational organized crime operates through complex financial structures, leveraging legitimate businesses, international banking systems, and cross-border investment opportunities. The gambling and hospitality investments associated with Pekovic represent classic money laundering vehicles precisely because they generate substantial cash flow that obscures the origins of funds. High-profile partnerships with former professional athletes provide additional legitimacy that helps these enterprises avoid scrutiny. This represents a strategic evolution where criminal organizations recognize the value of associating with respected public figures. The psychological and social factors that influence player decisions to engage with or maintain criminal connections deserve consideration. For players like Crittenton, who come from environments where gang affiliation provided identity, protection, and social structure, the transition to professional athletics doesn't automatically sever those foundational relationships. Loyalty to childhood friends, family members involved in criminal activity, or neighborhoods where they maintain roots can create continued exposure to criminal networks. Professional success may actually intensify these pressures as players become sources of financial support for struggling communities, while simultaneously becoming targets for exploitation by those same networks. The financial dimension operates differently for international players who develop criminal connections after establishing careers. Professional athletes accumulate significant wealth rapidly, often without corresponding financial literacy or understanding of complex investment structures. This creates vulnerability to partnerships that appear legitimate on the surface but serve criminal purposes. The expertise gap between professional athletes and sophisticated financial criminals becomes particularly pronounced in international contexts where language barriers, unfamiliar legal systems, and cultural differences compound confusion. Criminal organizations actively recruit individuals who can provide legitimate facades for illicit operations, and successful athletes represent ideal candidates. The Tim Donaghy scandal revealed how deeply organized crime could penetrate league operations through corruption of officials rather than players. Referees hold enormous power over game outcomes through subjective judgment calls that appear within the normal range of officiating decisions. This makes corruption particularly difficult to detect and proves extremely valuable for organized gambling operations. The involvement of individuals described as reputed mobsters in the Donaghy case demonstrates that traditional organized crime maintains interest in sports corruption despite modernization of tactics elsewhere. The combination of massive legal and illegal gambling markets surrounding professional sports creates enormous financial incentives for corruption schemes. The Gilbert Arenas gambling operation illustrates yet another variation, where players facilitate organized crime without necessarily understanding the full scope of their involvement. By providing his mansion as a venue for high-stakes illegal poker games, Arenas enabled operations connected to suspected international organized crime figures. This represents a facilitation role where the player's assets and status serve criminal purposes even if the player doesn't hold rank within the criminal organization itself. The distinction between active participation and passive enablement becomes legally significant, but both create vulnerabilities that organized crime exploits systematically. Prevention and intervention strategies must account for these varied pathways and recognize that different players face different risk profiles. Players drafted from urban environments with documented gang presence require intensive intervention focused on severing ties to criminal networks and providing alternative support structures. This includes financial education, security awareness, and assistance navigating relationships with individuals from their past who may seek to exploit their success. The professional environment must create sufficient distance from high-risk networks while acknowledging the psychological difficulty of abandoning communities and relationships that predate professional success. International players require different interventions focused on financial transparency and business partnership vetting. Enhanced due diligence should examine proposed business ventures in high-risk sectors and jurisdictions, particularly those involving partnerships with individuals connected to political power or enforcement agencies in regions known for organized crime activity. Mandatory reporting requirements for substantial investments, debt assumptions, or co-ownership arrangements could provide early warning of problematic relationships before they become deeply embedded. Professional advisors with expertise in international financial crime should review cross-border business ventures. League-wide education must emphasize that facilitation carries severe legal consequences even when players don't hold formal roles in criminal organizations. Providing venues, introducing contacts, or lending legitimacy to questionable operations can result in conspiracy charges and federal prosecution. The Arenas case demonstrates that players can face serious criminal charges even when they believe they're merely hosting social gatherings or helping friends with business ventures. Clear policies about prohibited activities and mandatory consultation before engaging in certain types of business ventures could prevent players from inadvertently facilitating organized crime. The role of player associations and unions extends beyond traditional labor issues to include comprehensive risk management and member protection. Players enter professional leagues at young ages, often lacking life experience and sophisticated understanding of legal and financial risks they'll encounter. Providing robust support systems, including legal consultation, financial advisory services, and ongoing education about various forms of criminal exploitation, serves both individual player interests and league integrity. The massive investments leagues make in player development should extend to comprehensive life skills and risk awareness training. Technology creates new vulnerabilities and opportunities for organized crime involvement in professional sports. Cryptocurrency and digital payment systems provide sophisticated money laundering mechanisms that traditional enforcement struggles to track and prosecute. Social media creates direct channels between players and both fans and criminal operators, bypassing traditional gatekeepers and enabling relationship development outside institutional oversight. Online gambling platforms multiply exponentially the opportunities for corruption and manipulation. These technological developments require updated prevention strategies and enhanced monitoring capabilities. The international dimension of professional basketball, with players, coaches, and executives moving between multiple countries and legal jurisdictions, creates inherent complexity that organized crime exploits. Different legal standards, varying levels of enforcement cooperation, and jurisdictional disputes make prosecution of cross-border criminal activity extraordinarily difficult, even when evidence exists. Extradition challenges, political considerations, and resource limitations mean many cases never reach prosecution. This reality creates relative safe havens where individuals with documented criminal connections operate with apparent impunity while maintaining profiles as legitimate business people. Public perception significantly influences how these issues are understood and addressed. High-profile individual crimes by celebrity athletes receive enormous media attention and generate public outrage, while sophisticated organized crime involvement often remains obscure or underreported. This creates misalignment between public concern and actual institutional risk. Individual violent crimes, while morally reprehensible and legally serious, don't threaten league integrity the way systematic organized crime involvement does. Yet public discourse focuses disproportionately on individual misconduct, while systematic corruption receives less sustained attention.
December 9th, 1977. A routine NBA game between the Los Angeles Lakers and Houston Rockets would become one of the most infamous moments in sports history. In a split second, two lives would be forever altered by a single punch that nearly killed a man and transformed professional basketball forever. The NBA of the 1970s was a far different league than the polished global product we know today. Violence was not just tolerated, but often celebrated. Players known as enforcers were praised for their physical intimidation, and brawls were common occurrences that the media romanticized. Into this volatile environment stepped Kermit Washington, a powerful forward for the Lakers who had built his reputation on physicality and defensive intensity. Washington's journey to that fateful night began in Washington, D.C., where he overcame significant challenges to reach the NBA. Drafted 5th overall by the Lakers in 1973, he had established himself as a reliable defender and rebounder. He wasn't a superstar, but he was exactly the kind of physical presence teams valued in that era. His teammates respected his work ethic and his willingness to protect them on the court. The incident itself unfolded in mere seconds during what had been a competitive third quarter. Washington became entangled with Houston center Kevin Cunnert after a rebound, leading to the typical shoving match that characterized the era. As Kareem Abdul-Jabbar moved to separate the players and defuse the situation, Houston's Rudy Tomjanovich made a decision that would change everything. Tomjanovich, known throughout the league as a peacemaker, saw the scuffle from across the court and rushed toward the melee at full speed. His intention was noble, to break up what appeared to be an escalating fight. But Washington, with his back turned and unaware of Tomjanovich's peaceful intentions, saw only an opposing player charging directly at him. In that fraction of a second, operating on pure instinct in a league where players were taught to defend themselves, Washington turned and threw a defensive punch. The collision was catastrophic. Washington's considerable strength, combined with Tomjanovich's forward momentum, created a perfect storm of devastating impact. The aftermath was horrific. Tomjanovich collapsed unconscious, blood pooling beneath his head on the forum floor. What initially appeared to be a broken nose was far more severe. The punch had fractured his face, shattered his jaw and nose, and cracked his skull so badly that his facial bones were detached from his skull. In one of the most chilling details Tomjanovich would later recount, he could taste spinal fluid dripping into his mouth as he lay on the court. Rushed to the hospital, doctors told Tomjanovich's family that the next 48 hours would determine whether he would live or die. The punch had come perilously close to killing him. Meanwhile, Washington watched in horror as the man he had never intended to seriously harm fought for his life. The NBA's response was swift and unprecedented. Commissioner Larry O'Brien fined Washington $10,000, the largest penalty in league history at that time, and suspended him for 60 days, causing him to miss 26 games. The financial impact was devastating, costing Washington approximately $60,000 in lost salary. Within weeks, the Lakers, unwilling to stand by a player who had become synonymous with the league's violence problem, traded him to Boston. But the official punishment was only the beginning of Washington's ordeal. The media and public reaction was fierce and unforgiving. He received hundreds of letters filled with racial slurs and death threats. The incident took on disturbing racial overtones, with Washington, an African-American, being vilified for injuring Tomjanovich, who was white. Both Washington and Abdul-Jabbar believed the punishment and public condemnation would have been far less severe had the racial dynamics been reversed. Washington became a scapegoat for everything wrong with the NBA's violent culture. He was permanently labeled as dangerous and malicious, despite the fact that closer examination revealed the punch to be a defensive reaction rather than a malicious attack. The narrative of the sucker punch became entrenched in basketball lore, overshadowing the more complex reality of a tragic misunderstanding that unfolded in milliseconds. The incident paradoxically became a catalyst for the NBA's transformation. Recognizing that their product was being damaged by its violent reputation and declining attendance, league officials implemented sweeping changes. New rules established automatic suspensions for fighting, enforcement became stricter, and a third referee was added to better monitor and prevent conflicts before they escalated. These changes laid the groundwork for the NBA's eventual rise to global prominence. The league that would later showcase Magic Johnson, Larry Bird, and Michael Jordan was built on the foundation of reforms triggered by that December night in 1977. In this sense, the darkest moment in basketball history became the catalyst for its greatest era of growth. For Tomjanovich, the story became one of extraordinary resilience and triumph. After undergoing extensive rehabilitation, he remarkably returned to play 3 more seasons, even earning an All-Star selection in the season immediately following the incident. But his greatest achievements came after his playing career ended. As head coach of the Houston Rockets, Tomjanovich guided the team to back-to-back NBA championships in 1994 and 1995. He later coached the United States Olympic team to gold in 2000 and was inducted into the Basketball Hall of Fame in in 2021. His life became a testament to the human spirits to overcome trauma and achieve even greater success. He eventually expressed forgiveness for Washington, bringing some measure of closure to their shared tragedy. Washington's post-incident career followed a different trajectory. He became a nomadic player, moving from Boston to San Diego to Portland, with a brief stint in Golden State. The psychological impact of the incident and the constant public hatred contributed to depression and diminished effectiveness on the court. His gritty physical style of play was forever haunted by what had happened that night. After retiring from basketball, Washington appeared to embark on a path of redemption. He founded Project Contact, a charitable organization dedicated to providing medical relief in underserved areas, particularly in Kenya. For years, he received praise for his humanitarian work, and many saw this as evidence of his genuine desire to atone for his past and use his celebrity for positive change. He was even inducted into the Academic All-America Hall of Fame for his efforts. However, this narrative of redemption would take a shocking and tragic turn. In 2018, Washington's charitable work was exposed as an elaborate fraud. Federal investigators revealed that he had diverted hundreds of thousands of dollars donated for needy families in Africa to fund lavish vacations, shopping sprees, and even plastic surgery for his girlfriend. He had also received illegal referral payments from lawyers who funneled money through the charity. Washington was sentenced to 6 years in federal prison for charity fraud, filing false tax returns, and aggravated identity theft. The organization that had served as a symbol of his redemption became the vehicle for his final downfall, adding another layer of tragedy to an already complex legacy. The contrast between Washington and Tomjanovich's post-incident lives is stark and instructive. Tomjanovich transformed trauma into triumph, using his experience as motivation to achieve even greater professional success while maintaining his dignity and character. His story demonstrates the power of resilience, determination, and the choice to move forward constructively after experiencing life-altering adversity. Washington's story is more complicated and ultimately tragic. While the initial incident was a terrible misunderstanding rather than malicious intent, his later actions revealed a pattern of calculated deception that extended far beyond that single moment of poor judgment. His life became defined not just by one split-second defensive reaction, but by years of fraudulent behavior that betrayed the trust of donors who believed in his redemption. The event of December 9th, 1977, remains one of the most discussed moments in sports history. The sound of the punch, which Abdul-Jabbar described as like a melon being dropped on concrete, continues to reverberate through basketball lore. Books, documentaries, and retrospectives continue to examine that night and its lasting impact on the sport and the men involved. Their story offers a powerful study in human nature and the different ways people respond to defining moments. It demonstrates how a single incident can set lives on dramatically different trajectories, and how the choices we make in response to trauma and adversity ultimately shape our legacies. Tomjanovich chose resilience and growth. Washington, tragically, chose a path that led to further destruction. Beyond the personal stories of Washington and Tomjanovich, their incident illuminated broader issues that continue to resonate in professional sports today. The role of race in how athletes are perceived and punished remains a contentious topic. The instant judgment and permanent labeling that Washington experienced in the pre-internet age serves as a preview of the social media pile-ons that modern athletes face, where context is often lost and redemption seems impossible. The incident also highlighted the responsibility that comes with celebrity and platform. Washington's later charity work, regardless of its fraudulent nature, demonstrated society's hunger for redemption narratives and second chances. Yet his betrayal of that trust reveals how some individuals struggle with the weight of their past and make increasingly poor decisions that compound their original mistakes. The punch that nearly killed Rudy Tomjanovich and forever changed Kermit Washington stands as one of sport's most complex and enduring stories, a reminder of both human frailty and the profound consequences that can flow from a single moment in time.
So I was arrested for shoplifting and pawning things from an Apple store to pay for my drugs and gambling. And a bunch of cops showed up at my place to put me in handcuffs and took me to jail. I really didn't know why. I mean, it's hard to explain. You're just sort of in an opioid stupor at some point.
The 1980s NBA was absolutely magical. This was the golden age of basketball, powered by the electric rivalry between Magic Johnson and Larry Bird. Fans packed arenas, television ratings soared. The league was finally becoming what it always dreamed of being. But behind all that glamour and glory, there there was a nightmare hiding in plain sight. For every superstar lighting up the scoreboard, there was another player being utterly destroyed by drugs. This wasn't just a few bad apples, this was an epidemic. Reports from that era claimed that somewhere between 40 and 75% of all NBA players were using cocaine. Think about that number for a second. Nearly 3 out of every 4 players, some teams earned a brutal nickname. They were called the Traveling Cocaine Circus. It was an open secret that festered in locker rooms and hotel suites across the entire country. The 1986 NBA draft perfectly captured this nightmare. Everyone remembers Len Bias, the Maryland superstar, was selected 2nd overall by the Boston Celtics. He was supposed to be the next great champion. Instead of becoming the next great champion, he died from a cocaine overdose just hours after hearing his name called. Bias remains the ultimate what-if story in all of sports history. His death shocked the world. But that same draft class produced other tragedies. These players didn't die on draft night. Their destruction happened slowly, publicly, and painfully on the professional stage. Players like Roy Tarpley watched their careers crumble over years instead of hours. Today, we're looking at 5 players whose incredible talent was completely wasted. 5 careers that should have ended in the Hall of Fame, but instead ended in tragedy. These aren't just statistics or old newspaper headlines. These are real human stories about men who had everything and lost it all. They had the talent to be remembered as legends. Instead, they became cautionary tales that still echo through the league today. Before we dive in, hit that subscribe button right now and drop a comment below. Did you know the NBA had a drug problem this serious? Back in the 1980s, to understand how bad things got, we need to go back even further. We need to talk about the league's first warning sign. Reggie Harding was a 7-foot giant from Detroit. He was a physical phenomenon unlike anything the league had seen. In 1962, he became the first player ever drafted straight from high school into the NBA. Nobody had done that before. The league had zero experience dealing with someone like him. They had no idea what they were getting into. Back in the 1960s, the NBA had almost no rules about player conduct off the court. They worried about gambling and on-court fouls. That was basically it. There was no mention of substance abuse, no treatment programs, no support systems whatsoever. On the basketball court, Harding looked unstoppable. He became the Detroit Pistons starting center after just 4 games. In his second season, he averaged over 11 rebounds per game. Red Auerbach, the legendary Boston Celtics coach, predicted that Harding would outshine them all. That's how much raw talent this kid possessed. But his talent was completely overshadowed by terrifying behavior. He slept through practices constantly. He missed team flights. Teammates whispered that he carried a pistol in his gym bag. His own teammates felt extremely uneasy around him. He threatened coaches and other players. Nobody felt safe. The truth about Reggie Harding was far darker. This was a man defined by violent criminality from his teenage years back in 1960. While still in high school, he raped Florence Ballard at knife point. Ballard was a founding member of the Supremes. This horrific crime established a pattern of violence that would only get worse. In 1966, the NBA suspended him for an entire season for conduct detrimental to professional basketball. During that suspension, Harding developed a heroin addiction. The drug didn't create his violent tendencies. It just accelerated them. It poured gasoline on a fire that was already burning out of control. His career became a ticking time bomb, and the league had absolutely no tools to defuse it. When Harding assaulted a police officer in 1965, the NBA suspended him indefinitely. The Pistons fined him $2,000, the largest fine in professional basketball history at the time, but they didn't offer rehabilitation. They didn't provide counseling. They didn't try to help him at all. The league's only strategy was to make the problem disappear from public view. They treated a man with severe addiction and deep psychological issues like a simple behavioral problem without any support structure. His fate was basically sealed after being waived by multiple teams and serving prison time for weapons charges. Harding's violent life came full circle. On September 1st, 1972, he got into an argument on a Detroit street. Someone shot him twice in the head. He died the next day at age 30. Just 2 weeks earlier, he had been making plans for his own funeral. It was like he knew what was coming. By the early 1980s, the NBA couldn't pretend anymore. The drug problem was destroying the league's reputation. Sponsors were getting nervous. Television executives were concerned. The public perception of the NBA was at an all-time low. When David Stern became commissioner in 1984, he made cleaning up the league his #1 priority. His main weapon was the 1983 anti-drug agreement. This policy introduced a 3-strike system for cocaine and heroin. If you got caught 3 times, you were permanently banned from basketball. It was brutal. It was designed to purge the sport of anyone the league considered undesirable. 2 all-star guards from the Atlanta Hawks were about to become the policy's first victims. John Drew was the real deal before everything fell apart. The 6'6" forward was drafted in 1974 and made an immediate impact. He earned all rookie first-team honors. He became a 2-time All-Star in 1976 and 1980. The man was a scoring machine, posting 5 straight seasons averaging over 20 points per game. His best year was 1976 to 77, when he averaged over 24 points per game for the Hawks. But while Drew was filling up the stat sheet, cocaine was destroying his life. During the 1982-83 season, he disappeared for 38 games to attend an 8-week drug rehab program. He tried to get clean, he really did, but he relapsed during the 1984-85 season. The Utah Jazz waived him immediately. His life quickly unraveled. He was arrested for passing bad checks. Then, in late 1986, police caught him selling cocaine to an undercover agent. In January 1986, John Drew became the first player in NBA history banned for life under David Stern's new policy. The league counted his most recent rehab stint as his third strike. He became the poster child for the NBA's aggressive crackdown. At the time, Drew warned that the punitive nature of this policy would keep guys from coming forward and admitting they still had problems. Nobody listened to him. His banishment marked the end of his public life. Drew simply disappeared from the spotlight. Reports later surfaced that he experienced homelessness. Eventually, he found work driving a taxi in Houston. He died of bone cancer in 2022. A quiet, tragic end for a man whose all-star talent was completely erased by addiction. If John Drew's story represents a quiet descent, then Eddie Johnson's story is a horrifying plunge into monstrous criminality. Fans called him Fast Eddie because of his blinding speed on the court. He was an elite talent, a 2-time All-Star in 1980 and 1981, a 2-time NBA All-Defensive second-team selection. In the 1980 All-Star Game, fans voted him in as a starter, and he delivered with 22 points. This guy could play at the highest level, but Eddie Johnson's off-court life was complete chaos from day one. His cocaine use started in college. His professional career was marked by bizarre and frightening incidents. In 1980, he fled what was suspected to be a drug dispute by jumping from a second-story balcony while gunmen fired at him. Doctors diagnosed him with manic depression. He often refused medication. This led to disruptive behavior so severe that the Hawks front office once had him involuntarily committed to a hospital. After multiple suspensions and a failed rehab attempt, in 1986, the NBA banned him for life. In 1987, he failed to comply with his aftercare program. The league got rid of Eddie Johnson, but also removed the one stabilizing force in his life. His post-NBA existence became nothing but crime after crime after crime. By 2006, his rap sheet included nearly 100 arrests, burglary, battery, robbery, assault on a police officer. The list went on and on. Then in August 2006, everything reached a horrifying low point. Police arrested Eddie Johnson for sexually assaulting an 8-year-old girl. The details of the case were absolutely sickening. In 2008, a court convicted him. He received a mandatory sentence of life in prison without parole. He would never see freedom again. He died behind bars in 2020. The stories of John Drew and Eddie Johnson expose a brutal truth. The NBA's punitive approach was perfect for protecting the league's image. It projected control and zero tolerance to the public. But for the actual human beings affected, it was a catastrophic failure. The league simply banished these addicts without providing any support that might have prevented their complete collapse. Drew faded into invisibility. Johnson descended into depravity. These were the direct consequences of a policy designed to protect an image instead of saving lives. The league cleaned up its reputation but left broken men in its wake. Eddie Johnson's fall even hurt innocent people. When news of his 2006 arrest broke, media outlets mistakenly published the photo of another former NBA player also named Eddie Johnson. That innocent man was a respected broadcaster who had to publicly defend his name. He had to tell the world he wasn't a monster. He called it the worst day of his life. Fast Eddie's toxicity was so profound it actively harmed other people. His legacy wasn't just self-destruction. It spread like poison to anyone connected to his name. Of all the talents lost to the NBA's cocaine era, Roy Tarpley's story is the most agonizing. At 6 feet 11 inches tall, with incredible skill and elite athleticism, he was the prototype of the modern big man. He had everything: the size, the speed, the basketball IQ, the work ethic. The Dallas Mavericks drafted him 7th overall in 1986. He made the all-rookie team in his first season. In year 2, he won the 6th Man of the Year award, averaging over 13 points and nearly 12 rebounds off the bench. The Mavericks reached the Western Conference Finals that season. People thought his potential was limitless. One statistical breakdown compared a 1990 performance to prime Hakeem Olajuwon and Charles Barkley. That game saw Tarpley put up 24 points, 25 rebounds with 12 offensive boards, 5 steals, and 3 blocks. Analysts called him the most devastating player that never was. The Mavericks built the entire franchise around him. They believed he would be their next championship centerpiece. This extraordinary talent makes his story even more frustrating. His career became a torturous cycle of hope and relapse. It was the same pattern over and over again. Promise followed by betrayal, forgiveness followed by failure. In October 1987, Tarpley first admitted his struggles with cocaine and alcohol. That admission was followed by DUI arrests in 1989 and 1991. Multiple league suspensions kept piling up. In October 1991, he refused to take a mandatory drug test. The league handed him his first lifetime ban. During his exile between 1992 and 1994, Tarpley went to Europe and played for Greek powerhouses Aris and Olympiakos. He absolutely dominated, averaging over 20 points and 12 rebounds per game. In 1994, he'd led the entire EuroLeague in rebounding. This wasn't a washed-up player finding success in a minor league. This was empirical proof that Roy Tarpley remained one of the best big men on planet Earth. His European success proved his talent never declined. His inability to stay sober became a tragedy of choice and disease, not fading skills. He could still play. He just couldn't stay clean. In 1994, the NBA reinstated Roy Tarpley. They granted him the ultimate second chance. He returned to Dallas and signed a 6-year contract worth $20 million. That was massive money back then. Everyone hoped this time would be different. The fans believed, the team believed, Tarpley himself believed. It wasn't. In December 1995, the league permanently banned him again. He had used alcohol and violated the terms of his aftercare program. He threw it all away one more time. Roy Tarpley's story hurts more than the others because his transcendent talent actually warped the system designed to punish him. The league and the Mavericks kept bending their own rules, offering him chance after chance. Each time he self-destructed, he failed despite receiving unprecedented institutional forgiveness, making the final outcome feel even more wasteful. After his final ban, his life became a long, slow fade into obscurity. He sued the NBA, claiming addiction was a disability under the Americans with Disabilities Act. They settled out of court. He briefly attempted a CBA comeback in 2005 before a hand injury ended it. On January 9, 2015, Roy Tarpley died at age 50 from liver failure, the final consequence of a life consumed by addiction. He died alone and forgotten by the league he once dominated. Rex Chapman's story represents something different. His addiction marked a crucial pivot point in NBA drug problems. The focus shifted from the recreational cocaine culture of the 1980s toward the insidious and often medically induced opioid crisis of the modern era. Chapman's tale wasn't about a party lifestyle, it was a cautionary story rooted in the immense physical toll the game demands. Chapman was a high-flying guard out of Kentucky and the first ever draft pick of the expansion Charlotte Hornets in 1988. Over a 12-year career with 4 teams, he was known for explosive athleticism and deadly shooting. In 1996, he famously scored 39 points and hit 9 three-pointers, handing Michael Jordan's 72-win Chicago Bulls one of their few losses. But injuries defined his career just as much as highlights. He endured relentless physical breakdowns, ankle sprains, fractures in his wrist and back, a broken leg, a painful nerve condition in his foot. Over the final years of his career, he underwent 10 operations. 7 came in just his last 3 seasons. This constant injury created a direct pathway to addiction. Doctors caused his dependency through medical treatment. It started with Vicodin prescribed for chronic nerve pain. The addiction escalated in 2000 when doctors prescribed OxyContin after an emergency appendectomy. The drug didn't just ease physical pain, as he later admitted, it melted away the social anxiety and depression that had plagued him since childhood. At the peak of his dependency, Rex Chapman was consuming 40 Vicodin pills and 9 OxyContin pills every single day. After retiring in 2000, his life spiraled. He developed a gambling addiction, he drained his finances, his marriage collapsed. The descent reached its humiliating public rock bottom in September 2014 when police arrested him for shoplifting $14,000 worth of merchandise from an Apple store in Scottsdale, Arizona. Chapman's story directly implicates the culture of professional sports, where playing through pain is treated like heroism. Athletes are systematically provided with the exact substances that can destroy their lives. Chapman stated it was the culture of the NBA at that time to get shot up with painkillers just to stay on the court. His addiction wasn't a moral failing. It was the tragic byproduct of a system that breaks bodies and then offers a dangerous path to relief. These 5 stories, though separated by different decades and circumstances, all share the same tragic theme. They show us the collision between immense talent and the devastating power of addiction. Reggie Harding was the violent precursor. His demons were too massive for the primitive framework of the 1960s. John Drew and Eddie Johnson were casualties of the 1980s cocaine era. Their careers sacrificed to save the league's public image. Roy Tarpley stands as the ultimate monument to wasted potential, a superstar talent given endless chances who still couldn't be saved. athlete. Rex Chapman represents the modern tragedy, where addiction wasn't born from excess, but from the physical sacrifice the game demanded. Together, these careers show us how the NBA's understanding of addiction has evolved. The punitive zero-tolerance policy of the 1980s has slowly given way to something more thoughtful. Today's league recognizes how physical health, mental health, and addiction all connect together. Modern players have access to more robust support systems than were ever available to these fallen stars. But the fundamental risks remain: the pressures of fame, the availability of wealth, the brutal physical toll of professional sports, the underlying human frailties that can lead anyone toward addiction. The ghosts of Harding, Drew, Johnson, Tarpley, and Chapman still haunt the league's history. Their stories serve as a permanent reminder of the razor-thin line between athletic immortality and personal ruin, revealing the immense human cost when the game is lost to disease. What do you think is the biggest lesson we can learn from these tragic stories? Drop your thoughts in the comments below, and make sure you hit that subscribe button for more deep dives into sports history. Thanks for watching.